I was at the Baldwin Hills Theater every weekend of my life, and we had no restrictions. There was no PG-13s or anything like that, thank God. Didn't realize they were all from around the world, that I was seeing I was seeing French movies, I was seeing Italian movies, I was seeing, because they dubbed them into English. The music caught my attention and inspired me, and I saw this name Herrmann. Every time I saw his name in a movie, I knew there was something a little bit special, an extra something was going to be there. There's these three instruments, go do a scary score. And he was like, okay, and he did. Kubrick was a huge influence on me. I think every movie he made was semi-perfect, if not in its own way perfect. How I learned to write music was listening to early Duke Ellington recordings from the 30s, and I learned to transcribe the music for the ensemble. My first performing was in Paris with a troupe called Le Grand Magic Circus when I was 18 years old. I then was in a street band for years. The Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo in its first years only played on the streets, and I was a fire breather, as well as trombone, guitar, bolophone, and violinist. Music was the only thing not on my list of things to do in movies that I would love to do someday. Which I consider my whole life to be a series of accidents. I've worked hard to make good use of the accidents, but nothing I did was planned. I didn't do anything on Forbidden Zone. It's my brother's film, and so he says, you're going to be in this scene as the devil. He didn't ask me. He says, that's what you're going to do. And I said, okay, he's my older brother. And then he says, and then when I'm done with it, you're going to score the film. So that was my first time putting music to image, although I didn't expect it to kind of lead to anything. In the 70s, film scoring suddenly took this radical turn away from the orchestral scores. Henry Mancini and Curtis Mayfield, a lot of people started doing jazz ensembles. Every career has a right place at the right time moment. And mine was coming along at exactly that moment. The 70s was now carrying into the 80s. I was given Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I didn't expect anybody to take it seriously, and I thought the studio would hear it and toss it immediately and then get Henry Mancini or somebody to do a proper score to the comedy. And as it would have it, they didn't for some reason, and the movie came out, and literally the next week, I was offered, well, for the next couple of years, every single quirky comedy made in Hollywood, and I got 27 years career so far out of that lucky break. It's the only way I was going to learn was to keep trying to do more scores. So Tim used to joke. He says, how are you doing like 5 films between each of my films? I go, I wouldn't be able to score your films if I didn't do 4 other films and learn a little more.
Do you like working on deadline?
I hate them.
But it really inspires you, obviously.
Well, you have no choice, you see. Athletes, I'm always amazed when I'm watching basketball, how they deal with that shot at the end of the game. It's like with that much pressure. And somebody once explained, they said, well, that's what makes a pro athlete, is they actually get better in those last moments. It actually makes them better, where most of us would crumble. And when you're an artist working in film, I think it's the same for composers, directors, writers, any part of us. It's like we're under these intense deadlines, and we're either wired to do our best work under that 1.5 seconds left on the clock, or we crumble. 12 hours a day, 6.5 days a week for 12 weeks. That's me working on a film. But the thing I feel like I'd most be remembered for took me 24 hours, less than 24 hours. I really wrote it in an hour. And I was in India years later because I heard a piece of music that inspired me so much I had to go to Bombay and see how they scored films there. And I met other Indian composers, and they were asking me about, oh, we hear you're a famous composer. What have you worked on? And I would tell them these big films I worked on. They hadn't seen any of them. And I said, oh, and then I said, The Simpsons. The Simpsons. And I realized right at that moment that if I die, that's what they'd put on my gravestone.